I have some very big news to share with you on Donald Trump. You know, I have my sources, and in talking to some of my sources, including some sources close to the campaign, I just heard a new name that I guarantee you haven't thought about for vice president at the top of the GOP ticket alongside Donald Trump. This is very, very interesting to me. And I want to kind of preview this a bit. Donald Trump was on Fox and Friends this morning by phone, and he was talking about the need to claim back a city like New York, which is clearly struggling with a lot of issues, from the economic struggle to the border struggle that's affecting them so significantly. Take a listen.
You've gained ground, 20 points with black voters. I mean, what's the operation going to look like in this general election? I hear from your advisors that there's going to be no city left behind.
We're going after everything. Look, we have a different country than we had even 2 years ago. This whole migrant invasion of our country, destruction of our country. You look at what's happened to New York and Chicago. You look at what's happened to Los Angeles. We have a much different country in many ways, but also from a voting standpoint. People that were modestly happy 3 years ago are devastated right now. Their country has been invaded. They can't go to hospitals. They can't go to schools. They can't use their playgrounds for their kids. They cancel out the little leagues. I read today where little leagues are being canceled out all over the country because you have migrants living all over the parks and the fields. Our country is a mess, and right. I think you have a much different country than you do. We're going to make a heavy play for New York. We're going to make a heavy play for Virginia, states that generally don't go Republican. I think they're going to go Republican in a lot. I think they've got, frankly, I think the Democrats have themselves a big problem.
And I think he's right. Anyway, he's making a point that he wants to go for these areas that historically have always been Democrat strongholds. Well, what's a way to do that? He said, I want to make a play for New York. So this is very interesting, you guys. Again, a name that you haven't really heard before. Drew, do we have the sound of former President Trump talking with Brett Baer? I'm wondering if Drew has that, because he was on saying to Brett Baer recently, you know what, like, it's really not that big a deal. Who I pick, it's not going to make or break anything. It's not really going to be earth-shattering. So he was trying to make the point that, you know, it's not going to be some kind of superstar like Tucker Carlson or maybe like Vivek Ramaswamy, whom I know you guys all like. I like him too. But let's watch him, Donald Trump, with Brett Baer here, and take a peek.
You said in our town hall that you had an idea, or you might have already decided about your VP pick. When do you think you're going to make that?
Well, it's never really had that much of an effect on an election, which is an amazing thing. Both election and primary, it's never really had much of an effect. I may or may not release something over the next couple of months. There's no rush to that. It won't have any impact at all. The person that I think I like is a very good person, pretty standard. I think people won't be that surprised. But I would say there's probably a 25% chance it would be that person.
Is Senator Tim Scott on the list now?
No, he's a great guy. You know, he endorsed me. There's an example. Nikki comes from South Carolina. Tim Scott is from South Carolina. But if you look, the governor, great governor, another senator, Lindsay, we happen to like Lindsay. But Henry McMaster knows her very well. He endorsed me. It's very hard for a governor to endorse somebody when you have, you know, I mean, Henry McMaster was the lieutenant governor under her. And he endorsed me, and he's going to be here tonight. In 15 minutes, you're going to be watching him speak. I'm going to introduce him. He's a great guy. He's done a great job. So everybody, almost everybody in South Carolina has endorsed me. What does that do?
Okay. So you heard him say, you know, it's not going to be like that earth-shattering, and he's kind of trying to temper everybody's expectations. But we also heard him say he wants to make a play for New York. So there's one guy out there that we have not been talking about. And you know, what I hear through the grapevine is he doesn't really care about, oh, you got to pick a woman or you got to pick a minority or this, that, or the other. Like, he's not, he's a true believer in the meritocracy, right? It's like, okay, who's going to help me win this thing? And I don't think he's as obsessed with checking a particular demographic. And so the name I'm hearing is the congressman from New York, Lee Zeldin. Representative Zeldin from New York. Take a look at him here. He was recently on with Martha McCallum, and he's talking about how so many representatives in New York have had success as Republicans, which you'd be kind of surprised about. But it shows you, it sort of joins with what Donald Trump was saying about how people, even in New York, which was forever like blue territory, are saying, I don't think so. This isn't working for me. Watch Representative Lee Zeldin.
I was running just a couple of years ago. The migrant issue, the border crisis, wasn't even a top 3 issue back then. Obviously, it is now. President Biden's numbers are worse. Kathy Hochul's numbers are worse. Eric Adams's numbers are worse, too. And people look at New York and they say it's a blue state because of these very populated blue counties in New York City. Staten Island obviously excluded, but you look at the rest of the state and you're trying to understand how does New York elect a congressional delegation November 22 that has 11 Republicans. It's because a lot of the suburbs and rest of the state they vote red. They're ready to vote for President Trump. You just posted that stat as it relates to the Jewish vote in New York. We've seen this over the course of the last few administrations, from President Obama and the Iran nuclear deal to President Trump coming in, and from moving the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, withdrawing from the nuclear deal, signing the Taylor Force Act into law, recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, signing an executive order to combat anti-Semitism. And then President Biden comes in and it rolls back a maximum pressure campaign against Iran, is a little bit, trying to straddle both sides post October 7th, as he has an issue within his base, within the Democratic base, there are a lot of people who support the pro-Palestinian position, and some of them, outwardly supporting a pro-Hamas position. So that's something that President Biden's dealing with. So the rightward shift, you point out the Jewish population, we see with the Asian Americans, with the Dominicans, and more. And the last thing I would say is you show that Siena College poll for 4 consecutive months. This has shown a competitive race, Biden versus Trump statewide. So if there's one Siena College poll that shows a close race, you say, maybe it's an outlier. But there's been 4 consecutive Siena College polls, and they only poll 22% Republican, but the turnout is always higher. That would be by far the worst Republican turnout in the history of the state. Clearly, there's going to be more Republican turnout than that Siena College poll showing a close race.
So if Donald Trump wants to make a very, very big push for New York to show that he's firmly with Israel, that he is strongly against Iran, that he's the opposite of Biden in those respects, maybe the answer is to have Lee Zeldin as his vice president. Wow, right? Think about that. Let's all digest it. We can talk about it at the end of the show because I know you're all weighing in on that. But it's a name that we haven't discussed before. And it's a name that could be very important to him. And by the way, good luck. Rachel Maddow, MSNBC, and the rest of you, you keep wanting to make these horrendous comparisons with, the worst leader in modern history. Good luck doing that, considering that Donald Trump has a Jewish son-in-law, a daughter who is converted to Judaism, Jewish grandchildren, and then might go with a Jewish vice president. That's going to be a hard narrative for the left to really fight.